I am here today with Rodney Geyer, OLS, who is an entrepreneur in the surveying space and obviously has lots of other business ideas that he has been contemplating and that we have been discussing. And Rodney, welcome. Rodney sold one of his surveying businesses back in 2023, and we were involved with that transaction. And Rodney wanted to share some of his experience, both of the transaction and working with the Tradewinds Group in that transaction years ago, and talk about some of the things that are going on now in our work together.
Well, thanks,
Welcome.
Jim, yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on here with you this morning. Everything that that occurred was so fantastic. I can never, ever say enough about how great that you guys have been. People often ask, well, as a land surveyor, what is it that is so important about what you do? And we often we find that in a project where there's multiple consultants and professionals, there's a hub with all these spokes going out to all these different people, municipalities, consultants, contractors, the client, and everybody else. And who's the person that's in the middle? That's the key to all of this, the hub of it. Well, that's the land surveyor because we are the ones involved with so many of all the other people, right? So, and that's how I kind of envisioned that's the feeling I have about what you and your team did, because, we had all these other people. We had a purchaser and his consultants and then there was, different lawyers and all these other factors that were in there. And you were the one who was in the center of it, who was able to relate to everybody and kind of take their language and change it so that it was in a language that we understood, and that, I mean, I am eternally grateful for that because without it, we would have just, yeah, I don't know how we would have managed this. So the number one thing, seek wise counsel. That is the first thing that comes to my mind when I have an important decision to make. And then because like you said, we went through this process and there were, things would pop up that I didn't expect or had no idea that they were gonna come up. And the whole inner workings of all the moving pieces was what really surprised me, right? But anyway, seek wise counsel is something that Cindy and I have always practiced.
It's sometimes we found it sometimes hard for, this is very strange to say, but it's true. It's hard sometimes for experts to recognize that they need experts and to say, you know what, I could, kind of figure this out a little bit myself.
When you and your team came up with a valuation, it was a bit surprising to me, and because I've purchased companies, multiple companies throughout my career, and it was always just an asset purchase. It was never shares. So it was a completely different animal that we had to really look at, right? So that was, and so the valuation, whether you're buying assets or you're buying shares, it's a completely different formula.
Mhm.
And for me, that was a new experience, and I just did not expect the numbers to land where they did. And then to get some confirmation from others that, yeah, you know what, that's not unreasonable. That's and of course we finally negotiated with the purchasers, and we were all on the same page pretty much, and it was really simple just to say, okay, well, the number wasn't the question. The question really came down to is what did they want to buy? And it's just a matter of putting a value to each of those items and coming up with a final number that was just it made the whole process very easy, very smooth when it came to the negotiations with the purchasers.
Right. You knew what you were selling, and they had a list of what they knew they were buying.
Yeah. And more so what they didn't want, right? So it was really easy, okay, to pull out these. There was two, there was just some of the equipment and some of the receivables. It was really easy just to say, well, and then, we could put a number on those, and then we did an adjustment down the road. And it was probably the easiest negotiation that I've ever had uh, with another party that I've ever experienced. It was complicated, with setting up a holding company and moving with all the moving parts and, having two different lawyers and an accountant and then your team. So yeah, it was, there was a lot of information moving around. So again, got complicated in certain regard, but with your team, it was, to break it down for us was so helpful. So
Couple of things that stick in my mind from the transaction. One of them was the spread between where we started, you and I having the discussion about what the company was worth and where you ended up was a very good thing. And the second thing that we were able to do because we got involved early enough was to take advantage of a specific tax window that was available to you at the time that um, the transaction was going to be tax efficient. You got vastly more tax efficient because we had this particular window uh, to work with on, and I've got like a six-figure number in my head about the tax savings that were involved with that particular part of the transaction. That was very, very fun. And tax rules move. So it's what can be done. Again, more lead times better because there are long-term things that can be put in place that will produce tax efficiency down the road. But we're like super delighted that this particular opportunity was available to you.
and I think that's a good point, for as far as advice to, any business owner going through what I did down the road is, don't just don't rush into it. Make sure you plan well in advance of what where you want to go, and that way, if you have that wise counsel, you can plan it so that it's most beneficial for yourself.
We like if I had in a perfect world, I would be able to start uh, thinking about how to structure somebody's tax efficiency with an eye to exit about 10 years earlier. And then 5 years, kind of the um, threshold for long-term efficiency. 2 years is almost a necessary time frame depending on how you're going to sell the business. But even more recently, I worked with a surveying firm that was selling, and we managed to do stuff in the year leading up to the transaction that was very effective from a wealth and tax perspective. So longer is better. Can always do things though.
I always had that, the idea that long term I was going to settle in the Bancroft Halliburton area. And, we had already, we had a second office working in that area. And, with the long-term plan that I was going to separate my company into two different companies. When I had an opportunity to buy another firm in this Halliburton area, that just expedited everything. And then, but the idea that I had thought of several years before, I had it all figured out already, and it was so easy just to move the pieces. As far as transferring assets and, removing assets from one company and then, putting them into the other one. And it just, yeah, it was that's just further to what you're saying is, if you have 5 years to, start, that process, well, that would be in my mind ideal. a good
Yeah.
5 years would be
Yeah.
just to move things around and be
Yeah.
strategic and take advantage of opportunities. But again, when it comes right down to it, you need to talk to the right people and making sure that things are done properly.